How to handle when your spouse is spending time with a negative influence. When you're in a relationship, it's natural to want your spouse to spend time with people who lift them up, support their growth, and make them feel positive about life. But what happens when you start to notice that your group your spouse is spending time with seems to be having the opposite effect? Maybe they're coming back from these hangouts feeling more negative, stressed, or even distant from you. Or perhaps these people have values that clash with the goals and direction of your relationship. If you've noticed this kind of change in your spouse and their social circle, it can be a tough situation to navigate, but it's not impossible. Today, I'm going to share 3 steps you can take to handle this situation in a way that protects your relationship and helps guide your spouse back to a more positive, supportive environment. Step 1, express your concerns calmly and clearly. The first step is to express your concerns calmly and clearly. I get it. When you see your spouse spending time with people who you feel are negatively influencing them, your first instinct might be to jump in and tell them to stop hanging out with that group altogether. But going with a you versus them mentality will only create defensiveness. So, have you tried talking to your spouse about how you're feeling? The key here is to focus on how their behavior has changed, rather than attacking the people they're spending time with. For example, you might say something like, "I've noticed that after spending time with this group, you seem more stressed or frustrated, and I'm concerned about how it's affecting you." This way, the focus stays on your spouse's well-being rather than blaming the people they're with. But opening the lines of communication is just the first step. How do you address the deeper issue of influence without it feeling like you're controlling who your spouse spends time with? Let's move to step 2. Step number 2, ask questions to understand, not judge. The second step is to ask questions to understand, not judge. If you go into the conversation already assuming the group your spouse is spending time with is bad for them, you risk creating even more resistance. Instead, approach the situation with curiosity. So, when was the last time you asked your spouse why they enjoy spending time with this group? What do they get out of it? Understanding their perspective can give you insight into what's drawing them in, and it might not be what you expect. For example, maybe your spouse feels supported in ways that aren't obvious to you, or maybe they're seeking something that's missing in other areas of their life. By asking open-ended questions and listening without judgment, you'll be able to have a productive conversation rather than just turning it into a conflict. Once you've understood their perspective, the next step is figuring out how to guide your spouse toward more positive influences without making them feel like you're controlling them. That's where step 3 comes in. Step number 3, set boundaries together and encourage balance. The third step is to set boundaries together and encourage balance. It's important that your spouse feels free to make their own choices about who they spend their time with. But that doesn't mean you can't have boundaries as a couple. So, what does balance look like in your relationship? Maybe it means agreeing to spend more time with friends or groups that bring positivity and growth into your lives, rather than those who create stress or negativity. For instance, you might suggest making time for activities or people that reflect the values you both want in your relationship. Instead of saying, "I don't want you hanging out with that group," try something like, "I'd love for us to spend more time with people who encourage and uplift us as a couple." This way, you're offering a solution without sounding controlling or restrictive. Setting boundaries doesn't have to be about cutting people out. It's about making sure that the time you both spend with others aligns with the goals of your relationship. And when you approach it as a team, it's much easier to make those changes without creating tension. So, to recap, when your spouse is spending time with people who may be negatively influencing them, start by expressing your concerns calmly, ask questions to understand without judgment, and set boundaries together. Remember, it's not about controlling your spouse's choices. It's about protecting the relationship and guiding them towards more positive influences. In the next video, I'll be talking about how to strengthen emotional connection in your relationship when outside pressures start to strain it. You won't want to miss it. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below. How do you handle outside influences in your relationship?